Welcome back to Demolition Worker, where we tackle the toughest jobs on Earth. Today we face a massive armored cargo train. This colossal beast was built to transport heavy minerals across harsh terrains. Its thick steel shell has survived decades of abuse. Over time, deep rust has fused these armored plates together, making this structure incredibly stubborn and highly resistant to standard dismantling. To conquer this iron fortress, we are bringing in the heavy cavalry. Two massive excavators will execute a perfect double team. The sheer weight of these machines shakes the ground beneath our feet. They are hungry for steel and ready for battle. Inside the cabin, our experienced operator evaluates the massive target. Precision and raw power must combine to break this armored shell. The first machine raises its heavy hydraulic arm. Its primary mission is to firmly secure the massive train car in place. With a deafening crunch, the heavy steel jaws clamp down on the roof. The rusty metal groans under the immense pressure. Now that the beast is fully immobilized, the second machine slowly rolls into the arena, armed with terrifyingly powerful hydraulic shears. These massive mechanical scissors can slice through solid steel beams like butter. Today they face their absolute ultimate heavy-duty challenge. The sharp blades bite into the thick armored plating. Brilliant sparks explode into the air as the heavy steel violently resists. Black smoke violently erupts from the exhaust stack as the powerful diesel engine pushes its hydraulic system to the absolute limit. You can actually see the thick armored panel warping under the immense pressure. Decades of heavy rust flake off the surface. With a terrifying screech, the thick steel finally surrenders. A massive chunk of the armored hull is violently ripped completely away. The heavy scrap metal crashes onto the dusty ground below. This first successful cut marks the beginning of a brutal dismantling. The holding machine adjusts its powerful grip, crushing the roof slightly to maintain absolute control over the violently shaking cargo car. Now the cutting machine targets the heavily reinforced structural ribs. These thick beams provide the main structural integrity for the train. Watch closely as the hardened steel blades crush the thick support beam. The incredibly strong metal twists agonizingly before finally snapping. This perfect synchronization is absolutely mesmerizing to watch. One machine firmly holds the prey while the other aggressively tears it apart. The mechanical beast grabs a long strip of armor and pulls backward. Its heavy steel track slips slightly in the dirt. The massive side panel violently rips away, completely exposing the dark, hollow interior covered in decades of hardened black mineral dust. Bright sunlight suddenly floods into the dark, cavernous space. Thick clouds of ancient mineral dust float lazily through the illuminated air. The holding excavator shifts its immense weight, slowly tilting the heavy train car to expose the highly reinforced structural steel undercarriage. The cutting machine aggressively attacks the thick base frame. The powerful hydraulic shears bite deeply into a massive solid steel block. A beautiful shower of bright orange sparks rains down. The massive diesel engine roars loudly as the machinery fights the steel. Inside the hot cabin, the focused operator manipulates the complex joysticks with incredible precision. This job requires intense concentration and skill. A deafening crack echoes across the dusty yard. The powerful shears have finally broken through the absolute thickest part of armor. A gigantic section of the heavy undercarriage falls away. The massive impact violently shakes the ground and creates a dust cloud. The first machine temporarily releases its tight grip on the ruined roof, quickly repositioning to secure the newly exposed base structure. The powerful claw grabs the solid base, effortlessly lifting one entire end of the heavy train car straight off the ground. The second excavator quickly maneuvers to the opposite side, immediately beginning to slice the remaining heavy armored roof panels completely off. The hydraulic shears slice through the thick roof like a giant mechanical can opener, leaving behind terribly sharp, jagged steel edges. A massive strip of the armored roof curls upward as it is cut, looking exactly like a gigantic twisted metal shaving. The cutting machine violently grabs the curled steel piece and forcefully rips it entirely away from the heavily damaged train frame. The incredibly heavy roof panel is casually tossed onto a rapidly growing pile of twisted, rusted scrap metal located just nearby. The two mechanical giants are now directly facing each other, with a completely unroofed and ruined train car trapped between them. The holding machine forcefully pushes down on the thick floor, violently flattening the remaining armored side walls outward into the dirt. The aggressive cutting machine attacks the incredibly heavy steel floorboards, methodically slicing them into much smaller, highly manageable rectangular scrap chunks. The massive shear blades snap shut on a thick floorboard. The incredible mechanical force creates a highly visible shockwave of dust. The experienced operator of the holding machine watches very carefully, constantly ensuring the massive steel structure does not collapse highly unpredictably. The cutting machine completely removes the final floor section, finally revealing the massive solid steel axles and heavy train wheels beneath. Take a close look at these incredibly thick, solid steel train wheels, now heavily rusted and half buried in the dirt. The holding machine firmly grabs the heavy axle assembly, violently pulling it entirely free from the crushed remains of the train. The massive steel axle and wheels swing in the air briefly before being violently dropped onto the ground with a thud. The cutting machine carefully moves in to permanently separate the heavy wheels from the thick axle using its sharp shear tips. The sharp shears aggressively bite into the thick axle shaft. The solid metal is incredibly thick, requiring multiple highly precise cuts. The holding machine heavily steps on one end of the rolling axle, keeping it perfectly still while the powerful cutter attacks. With a final agonizing crunch, the incredibly thick solid steel axle violently snaps in half. The heavy wheels roll slightly apart. Looking across the dusty demolition site, the once mighty armored cargo train is now just a scattered field of mangled steel. The two powerful excavators immediately begin the vital cleanup phase, carefully sorting the different types of heavy steel into separate piles. The holding machine utilizes its massive claw to efficiently scoop up smaller pieces of twisted siding, dropping them into a bin. The cutting machine lifts a long, highly jagged steel beam and methodically cuts it into three smaller, perfectly equal-sized pieces. The heavy shear blades cleanly snip the thick steel beam. The incredible precision of this massive hydraulic machine is absolutely impressive. A massive industrial dump truck slowly backs into the active frame, its loud reverse alarm echoing through the incredibly dusty air. The holding machine effortlessly lifts us a massive pile of twisted scrap metal and carefully lowers it into the waiting truck bed. The incredibly heavy steel violently crashes into the empty truck bed, making the entire massive vehicle bounce heavily on its suspension. The aggressive cutting machine continues to systematically break down the absolute largest, most incredibly stubborn pieces of the train's main frame. A massive, heavily rusted steel bolt is violently sheared completely off a thick plate. The heavy bolt head flies through space. The two powerful machines now work in a perfect rhythm, performing a highly synchronized mechanical dance of absolute destruction and organization. The camera slowly pans across the rapidly growing pile of processed scrap metal, shining beautifully wherever fresh cuts expose clean steel. The cutting machine bravely tackles the heavily armored front coupling of the train, an incredibly massive, solid block of forged steel. The powerful shears visibly struggle, rapidly slipping off the smooth, rounded edges of the coupling block. Bright sparks shower completely harmlessly. The holding machine quickly comes over to assist, firmly pinning the heavy coupling block against the dirt so it cannot move. With the massive block fully secured, the sharp shears bite down perfectly on the heavy joint, completely crushing the locking mechanism. The incredibly heavy steel coupling violently splits into two separate pieces. These powerful machines have finally conquered the absolute hardest part. The highly skilled operators take a very brief pause. The massive excavators idle quietly, their powerful diesel engines rumbling deeply together. A beautiful cinematic drone shot perfectly captures the two massive excavators standing highly victorious over the gigantic pile of ruined scrap. The holding machine quickly resumes its heavy work, effortlessly scooping up the destroyed remains of the thick coupling and loading it. The cutting machine slowly moves toward the back end of the site, discovering a completely forgotten section of thick armored paneling. The sharp shears meticulously slice the heavy paneling into long, remarkably thin strips, perfectly preparing it for highly efficient future transport. Thick industrial dust violently blows directly across the camera lens, perfectly adding a wonderfully gritty and highly realistic cinematic visual feel. A second massive dump truck finally arrives on the scene, completely ready to carefully transport the next heavy load of steel. Both powerful excavators work flawlessly together to fill the second truck incredibly fast, simultaneously dropping massive heavy loads of twisted metal. The heavy scrap metal slowly settles deep inside the truck bed. The incredibly jagged ends lock together like a violent puzzle. The fully loaded truck slowly pulls away from the site, its massive engine heavily straining under the immense weight of steel. The holding machine utilizes its massive heavy tracks to violently crush remaining small debris directly into the dirt, perfectly smoothing everything. The cutting machine intelligently uses the wide flat side of its heavy shears to carefully sweep scattered metal into a pile. The once highly chaotic demolition site is now looking incredibly organized and beautifully clean, a wonderful testament to the operator's skill. Look closely at the massive shear blades. The bright yellow paint is severely scratched, beautifully showing the evidence of hard work. The holding machine's massive steel claw is similarly battered but remains completely unbroken, absolutely ready for the next heavy demolition job. The highly skilled operators finally open their thick cabin doors, happily letting in fresh air after a long, incredibly intense battle. The two massive yellow excavators safely park side by side, their incredibly heavy mechanical arms slowly lowered in a restful posture. The beautiful evening sun slowly begins to set over the dusty industrial yard, casting incredibly long and highly dramatic dark shadows. We take one final cinematic look at the completely empty space where the massive armored cargo train once stood so defiantly. The camera slowly pans up toward the beautiful golden sky as the thick industrial dust finally settles over the quiet zone. This beautiful cinematic slow-motion shot perfectly highlights the incredibly massive scale and absolute raw power of these truly wonderful machines. The very last few remaining pieces of twisted scrap metal glow beautifully orange in the fading light of the setting sun. Incredible teamwork and massively powerful heavy machinery have completely transformed this previously cluttered industrial landscape into a perfectly clean, empty space. We hope you thoroughly enjoyed this incredible display of massive mechanical power. Please remember to subscribe for more heavy demolition content. Thank you so much for watching our video today. We will see you next time on another exciting episode of Demolition Worker.